we're going to start with a little preview of the Alabama Crimson Tide going in 2025. And we're going to start specifically on the offensive side of the ball. And what I don't want to do, Graham, and if I get going too much into this, please stop me and let me know. I don't want to rehash 2024. We did that plenty last year. I think everybody that watches this show understands how I felt about the offense, how I felt specifically about the quarterback. But I do think there are a few points to look at from 2024 that we can kind of discuss as a segue into 2025. So I would say last year Alabama's offense was very inconsistent, very sporadic. You had the first half of the Georgia game, well, mainly the first quarter and a half of the Georgia game, where they looked like the best offense in the country. Jalen Milroe looked like a number 1 draft pick. Everything was rolling. But then you had a game like Tennessee where the passing game was anemic. Nothing was flowing in play calling there was no rhythm. There were turnovers. There was a lot of inefficiency. And I think it's important to note that the biggest change from last year to this year, as far as the coaching staff-wise, is Ryan Grubb coming back from Seattle to be the offensive coordinator this year, replacing Nick Sheridan. Nick Sheridan is still on staff as a quarterback coach, but I think Ryan Grubb coming back in an official capacity as the offensive coordinator, I think it's huge for this team because I do think there's a special chemistry that him and Kalen DeBoer have together as fellow coaches on the staff. And there's a lot of trust there because they've worked together for 10 to 12 years. And I think it's very, very vital. I also think it's vital to know and to note that what Alabama fans saw last year in terms of offensive scheme, offensive philosophy, that was not the Kalen DeBoer offense. And I know there have been plenty of people, and one thing that has really frustrated me is a line that I've heard over and over and over again. Well, just Jalen Milroe was not a scheme fit for the Alabama offense. And I agree with that to an extent. He was not a scheme fit for that offense. But I would also contend they did not run their full offense last year. And we said that on the show at the time. We also noted, I believe it was week 2 or 3 of the season, where Kalen DeBoer said there is a lot of stuff that we run and that we would like to implement that we won't this year because we don't have the personnel to. I got told by many that was referring to the offensive line. It was referring to the receivers. It had nothing to do with the quarterback. Well, then last week, Ryan Grubb comes out and says, we're not running the Jalen Milroe offense this year. We're running our offense with an offense that is predicated on passing the ball downfield, and that is kind of what kickstarts this offense is the passing game. That is the primary focus. So for those who say that, Jalen Milroe just wasn't a scheme fit, I would just argue that Jalen Milroe, no matter which offensive coordinator he had, he was very hard to build around because there were a lot of limitations that you had to account for, which limited your playbook, which limited how many counters and how many multiples you could throw at defenses based on how they were playing you. You had it's like a pitcher that only had a fastball. I know I've used that analogy. You only had a fastball, but you don't have a curveball. You don't have a sinker or something to keep the batter kind of off balance. It's the same for an offense and defense. And I think that's really important to note. And I think by the end of the year last year, when it had gotten so bad in the Oklahoma game, in the Michigan game, many Alabama fans who had defended Jalen Milroe over and over and over again finally came to the realization of, yeah, he's just not getting the job done. And again, like I mentioned last year, it's not all on him. There were many factors that kind of contributed to that. But I think we can all say that his limitations significantly hindered Alabama last year.